Welcome to the Texas Values Report. This is Jonathan Saenz, president of Texas Values. Great to be with you on another glorious week in the state of Texas. We're already talking about college football at my house. I don't know about you, but, it gets a little lonely, in between seasons over in Texas where we like to keep track of those things. But this is not a show about the sports. We talk about the issues of faith, family, and freedom in the arenas of the courts, the legislature, and the media. And you may or may not have noticed that I've been traveling quite a bit. A lot of our work is focused at the state level. And so if I'm going to travel, it's going to be at the state level around the state. And we do have a big state. But I had the really great honor of serving as a national delegate at the RNC, the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, just days after, 48 hours after President Trump was, survived an attempted assassination. I don't even feel like I've really gotten to talk about this. I think it's the first time I've been back in the studio in several weeks. Earlier in July, I tried to take a little time off with the family. So I was either running around chasing a new little puppy, or I was trying to cool off somewhere from the Texas heat. And somewhere in the middle of that, I made my way out to Wisconsin. And then last week I was in Washington, D.C. But, it can be tough sometimes with our work to sort of step back from everything and, not take notice of what's going on. And sadly, in some ways, but also very encouraging in some ways, there's been a lot going on, things to be concerned about, but also things to be encouraged about. And somewhere in the middle of that, I did host a 4th of July party that was a lot of fun. Certainly one of my favorite holidays of the year, just a little bit below Christmas. But during that time, I got to interact with some extraordinary people, some that I've known from the past and have met before, some that I've heard about, maybe seen on social media or through our work, but got to meet in person. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. And one of those people that I was able to cross paths with is going to be our guest today on the Texas Values Report. You've known, heard, if you've not, if you're paying attention to some of our work, one of the biggest issues that we've been talking about and covering is really the attacks, the concerns, the effort by many to allow our kids and encourage them and make money off our Texas children and children from other states from having these gender transition surgeries. And a big part of it, and the concern has been, we don't think a lot of people that are involved in these process, this really scary version of science are telling the truth. And so trying to get information and trying to have good information to use when we talk about these issues. On top of that, we passed a state law, Senate Bill 14, to make it clear that we're not going to allow these things to happen and we're going to protect kids. But apparently some people don't want to follow the law, or they don't want to really adjust their standards and their processes as a result of that. And someone who's been right in the middle of this discussion, particularly lately, is going to be our guest today on the Texas Values Report. Vanessa Sivadge is a registered nurse. She has a background of working at Texas Children's Hospital, and she's what many people are calling a whistleblower. She's talking about concerns related to Medicaid fraud and some of these different issues, and she's right here from the state of Texas. Vanessa, welcome to the Texas Values Report.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you and I got to meet last week as a part of a conference in Washington, D.C. You did a great job. I think a lot of people have heard about Dr. Eitan Haim's situation as a whistleblower, serving as studying medicine at the time at Texas Children's Hospital as a resident. But your story's come up a little bit more recently, but that doesn't diminish its significance. Tell us a little bit. I'm going to circle back around and talk about some of your background, but tell our listeners and viewers out there who may not be aware of the situation, what's going on and how you got involved in this situation. And then we'll talk a little bit more about this incredible and crazy knock you got on your door.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a true honor to speak with you. My name is Vanessa Sivadge. I am a registered nurse in Houston, Texas. Born and raised in Texas, and went to nursing school, graduated in 2015, and accepted what I thought was my dream job in 2018 at the nation's largest pediatric hospital, and spent 3 years in the cardiology department before transferring over to a pediatric multi-specialty clinic in which Dr. Richard Roberts was seeing transgender patients on a regular basis, and really had a lot of firsthand exposure into how he saw these patients, how he treated them, how he affirmed the false identities that they had adopted for themselves, how he prescribed cross-sex hormones on nothing other than the patient's request, and ultimately what the patient wanted to see in the mirror, the changes that the patient wanted to achieve. And so as a Christian and as a believer in Christ, this was a travesty and, just a really devastating thing to walk through and to observe how these patients are truly, just quickly, I want to touch on this. Some of them are just truly going through a really, really hard time. Some of them are autistic. Some of them have just previous abuse in their past. And so there's no doubt that they're going through just some turmoil internally. And so what I don't feel it is right ultimately is to affirm a lie, is to lie to these children who are going through a hard time and who are looking for validation and approval. But it is my opinion that we have medical providers who are convincing and manipulating parents to start down this path of medical transition for their child. And I believe that this will lead to a lifetime of regret.
Well, look, I share your concern. This is an issue we've worked on for 4, if not 5 years, if not going back further. As a matter of fact, I want to share this on my Facebook page and encourage people that are watching on Facebook as we're broadcasting live, if you're watching the program here, to share this also on your personal page, because we want more people to have the benefit of hearing and being a part of this important conversation. So I am going to share this on my page, and then we'll rejoin the conversation again if I can get there, if I remember how to navigate my own page here. So let me share this here. Okay, done. If I can do it, I'm 50 years old, you can figure it out too, all right? So, Vanessa, I mentioned the long time of our work, 4 to 5 years of not going back further, having concerns about these issues. I imagine, even though you're not involved in some of the work that we do, that you were probably hearing about these discussions and things going on at the state capitol, that there was a conversation starting to grow amongst citizens and parents and Christians and others who had concerns that there were these procedures happening on kids. And maybe there were even stories out there suggesting, oh, it's not really happening or it's very uncommon. And so, but I imagine you at least were hearing about some of that happening while you were in the middle of this field at Texas Children's Hospital, excuse me.
Yes, absolutely. And, it took some time because, everyone is, I'm sure, aware by this point, Texas Children's Hospital concealed the existence of their transgender program from the public and from lawmakers. And they unequivocally denied that this was taking place until May of 2023. And that is when an anonymous whistleblower at the time came forward with journalist Christopher Rufo to expose the existence of this program. And that I read that for the first time, and I knew that that was true because I was working in this clinic in which the hospital had repeatedly denied its existence. And so I knew that I had to come forward. I knew I had to affirm the testimony of this anonymous whistleblower. And so that's exactly what happened. A couple of days later, I came forward anonymously with journalist Christopher Rufo, and I essentially corroborated the validity and the truth of this anonymous whistleblower's testimony at the time. And the good news is that a couple of days later, not after me, but after his testimony, the Texas legislature convened and they passed Senate Bill 14, which effectively ended or criminalize gender affirming care in Texas.
Well, so we could, say publicly and accurately that Texas Children's Hospital was very aware that the legislature was in the process of reviewing these things, of scrutinizing these, these different procedures on kids, puberty blockers, surgeries, all this kind of stuff. And so they were on notice. As a matter of fact, I think they were asked by it during that time period, and they sort of backed away or like, oh, no, we're not involved in doing any of that. And that's probably what prompted Dr. Heim to come forward. There's an article out last week, a couple of weeks ago, June 18th, 3 weeks or so ago, from Chris Rufo, speaking of Christopher Rufo, The Murky Business of Transgender Medicine. And he talks about some of these issues in great detail of what was going on at Texas Children's Hospital. But, look, this is big business. And Texas Children's Hospital, I grew up in Houston. I'm fifth-generation Texan, like you mentioned. This is one of the, world-renowned, one of the most successful, well-known, hospitals of its kind. I mean, it's the jewel of Texas, I think you could argue, in many ways, particularly when it comes to things at the children's level. And here we find out you can't trust them. And this led to you getting a knock on your door. Tell us about that.
That's right. Yeah, it's wild to think about the fact that since Christopher Rufo published my story on June 18th and subsequently released the footage of the FBI coming to my home, that it's been viewed over 6 million times. And it's funny because when this process started, I never could have predicted that in a million years. But that's exactly what happened. Last year on July the 24th of 2023, I was having dinner with friends here at my home with my husband. We were hosting, and it was a Monday evening, just like any other, and heard a knock at the front door and went with my husband to see who it was. And lo and behold, there's two federal agents that are asking to speak with me about issues at my work. And they flash their badges. They say they're from the FBI. And they ultimately inform me that they are at my house because they are aware of my views. They're aware of my beliefs against transgender medicine. And ultimately, they wanted to recruit my help in order to expose the identity of this anonymous whistleblower who had come for me. And when I referred to this person as an anonymous whistleblower, they aggressively corrected me and said, no, he's not a whistleblower. He's a leaker. And he has violated HIPAA by releasing confidential patient information to the public. And we are here in order to recruit your help into exposing him to the world. Now, of course, I had no idea who he was at the time, never met him before. It's a huge hospital system. But it is my belief that they had come to my house because they believed that they could coerce and intimidate me into helping them.
No, I agree with you 100%. We're talking with Vanessa Sivadge. She is a registered nurse living here in Texas. She's got some history, having an incredible and enlightening and a frightening experience at Texas Children's Hospital, which we're talking about today. There's a great article written about it by Christopher Rufo from June 18th, 2024, The Murky Business of Transgender Medicine. We'll post that in the comments so people can get a link to that article. Vanessa's going to speak at our policy forum. You want to hear more of this conversation? Come to our policy event September 13th and 14th. And there's a lot to talk about on this issue. So here's the FBI, correcting you because they're lawyers, right? They've got a court order from a judge. No, they don't. They've made these determinations on their own. Clearly there to intimidate you. No notice. They show up, and all of a sudden you find yourself in the middle of this, but probably, I don't know if you would anticipate or expect that the FBI would show up your door, but you probably knew that there probably are some people that knew you had information they didn't want anyone to know about and can be incredibly powerful and valuable for the public. But there's no indictment against you. Dr. Eitan Haim, has been indicted by the Department of Justice, but there's at least some fear and concern on your part that, those steps may be next. I understand you've retained counsel to protect yourself.
That's right. Just a couple of weeks ago, on June 18th, I came forward publicly with my face and my name in order to expose Medicaid fraud at Texas Children's Hospital.
So
And
wait a minute. Hold on a second. So let me make sure I'm following you. Not only did you have concerns about what was going on at Texas Children's Hospital, just from, sort of a medical standpoint, and the concern about kids, and the fact that the state was in the middle of passing a law that is now state law and has been upheld by the courts, SB 14. There's also this additional element of Medicaid fraud that is something I don't think has been talked about before in the context of this issue. Am I right?
That's correct. Yes.
So help us walk through this with us, because, I'm a lawyer, but even myself, I don't have a lot of history with being able to, understand all the pieces. Walk through it for us when you talked about Medicaid fraud. Tell us what that looks like and sort of what you've seen and how this fits together.
Absolutely. So the Texas Medicaid policy, which has been in place at least since 2015, clearly states and indicates that any kind of hormone or treatment or surgery related to gender-affirming care is not covered by the state of Texas. So that is very clear. It is widely available for anyone to see. And
real quick, too, I know you're using the phrase, and you're not doing your air quotes or whatever, but gender-affirming care sort of, as a nice gesture so people can follow along with what it's typically called in some of these fields, even though you and I may disagree with it. But that is what we hear a lot. So continue.
Yes. Yeah. I just to be very clear, I am of the belief that there is no such thing as a transgender child. There is male and there is female, and then there are children confused about their sex. So I use that term, but I also just want to be clear that I don't believe there's truly such a thing as a transgender child. So
on the Medicaid fraud, and I apologize, I interrupted you. So you have some statutes and state law that's in place as it relates to Medicaid, and what was going on at Texas Children's Hospital in relation to this?
Yeah. So in the months following the FBI visit to my home, I just started noticing some red flags and some discrepancies in the paperwork. And what I discovered is absolutely shocking. And that is that Texas Children's is using Medicaid funds to pay for and cover any kind of cross-sex hormone or treatment for children, for minors. And that is illegal under the Texas Medicaid policy, as I stated.
And it didn't become illegal in 2023 like SB 14 is. Not that I think that gets Texas Children's off the hook from some of the things they've been doing, but they can't argue, well, that law was just passed. It went into effect in September 1, 2023, like SB 14 did. You're talking about a law that went into place almost 10 years before. So that was clearly illegal.
Correct. Yes.
Gotcha.
The two are separate. They are completely distinct. And so I think it's important to make that note that long before the law was passed in September of 2023, that this was already very much stated and not covered in Texas. So moving on, the second thing that I discovered was that physicians, that providers are intentionally misdiagnosing healthy patients who are confused about their sex for the purpose of justifying the prescription of cross-sex hormones. And it is my belief that this is not just happening here in Texas, but this is happening across the nation.
Okay, so would that mean there are some limited circumstances where cross-sex hormones might be used, but you would have to have a certain type of diagnosis to do that? And so Texas Children's Hospital, some of the doctors there are intentionally lying, manipulating this process and how they code or how they categorize these things, knowing that that's the only way they can get around or try to get around these Medicaid requirements. Would that be accurate to state it that way?
That is absolutely accurate. Not just that, but it's not as if the hospital is attempting to disguise or cover up what they're doing with this. This is it's just as simple as I was going about my job and there is a child that is either covered under Medicaid or CHIP or STAR one of those three. And lo and behold, they are confused about their sex, and the doctor has diagnosed, for example, a healthy male as having an estrogen deficiency. And that then justifies the prescription of estrogen for this healthy male, who that diagnosis is a fraudulent diagnosis. Males don't have a natural estrogen deficiency because they're male, and it's a fraudulent diagnosis because it's not clinically correct.
So let me, just for a second, and I don't want to put words in your mouth either. These are just my words because I know you've had to retain counsel and things could get really serious for you. I hope they don't. I hope we have a different Department of Justice, or a different president pretty soon. But look, that doesn't mean that some people might still not try to get away with these things or put pressure on you or scare you into silence, or at least try to. I'm just going to state this from my own opinion, and you don't have to respond to this. My impression is, I think it's fair to say, because I've been around a lot of the stuff, particularly in Texas, it wouldn't surprise me at all that there's sort of this underground, word of mouth, like, hey, if you go to Texas Children's Hospital, wink, wink, they'll make sure you get the right care. And then people are playing along, knowingly, intentionally, giving inaccurate diagnosis and different things, whatever they need to do to make sure that they keep the gravy train going and the revenue coming, because I've seen this type of deception and lies when we've had legislative hearings. And again, I'm not asking you to agree with me on this. I'm just telling you that's my assessment of what's going on. And I don't think it's hard to come to that type of conclusion based on some of the things that you're telling me. You're going to speak at our event, and we're going to give you a lot more time then when you come to our event September 13th and 14th here in Austin. If you don't have your tickets yet, we encourage you to do that. It's going to be an extraordinary event. This is an event we do every year, the Texas Faith, Family, and Freedom Forum. It's an annual event. It's our 7th year to do it. So a lot of great speakers. Dr. Eitan Heim's going to be there too. Okay. This is going to be a big issue that we're going to discuss. Look, you were at an event in DC, and I think, when sometimes people hear the whistleblower things, they may think negative, they may think positive, but it takes a lot of courage for you to go through this. What has it been like for you through all of this, and particularly lately? And I know you got a lot of good support, and you've even got some type of effort online to help fund this because things could get really tough legally. Tell us how you've been navigating that and how people can help you.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really happy to say that both the federal and state governments have initiated and have opened an investigation into the misuse of funds. And so I think that is a huge win. The House Oversight Committee and the Texas Speaker of the House have both released letters to that effect. So the hospital has subsequently announced that I am being investigated. And after that announcement, I retained legal counsel. And so I am fundraising for my legal defense at this time. And so I'm so grateful for all the messages of support. I'm so grateful for just all the prayers that I've received.
Well, look, and who knows what the future will hold. I mean, it concerns me that, the climate that we're in. I was in D.C. when there were some, I think just not even protests, but, terroristic type aggression on Union Station when I was in D.C. last week. There's just a lot of tension these days. And this is a huge issue in the state of Texas. In the Texas Children's Hospital, I think they've already taken a hit, but they're going to take a huge hit when some of this information continues to come out. And so, but it's necessary, and particularly in the field like medicine, where we should be able to trust people and people's lives are on the line. We know some of these procedures are irreversible, could be devastating. We know that the suicide rate goes through the roof for people who go through these transitions, not the opposite of what we hear a lot of times the liberal media talking about. And so do we have that link, Ashley? We can put that in the comment or whatever, a link if you want to support Vanessa's efforts. Look, these lawsuits can go on for years when they do start. And so if you've got the ability to support this effort, we encourage you to do that. When she speaks at our event, there'll be an opportunity, I'm sure, anytime people want to go to the website. And we'll be in prayer for you. Vanessa, I'm excited to see you again at our event in September. I think we're going to have more information before then, right? Obviously, the state of Texas and many of its authorities are going to be investigating these things. We've heard many of our state elected officials talk about this issue. I know the author of the bill, Tom Oliverson of Senate Bill 14 in the House, has a medical background himself. This issue has become very serious, and I think a lot of other people across the country are noticing. I don't want to say that we're, the tide is turning, but it certainly is moving in the direction of turning, if you will, that we're now starting to get a lot more information. And at the root of it, though, it's about the impact that it's going to have on children, I think, even so much in the medical community. And so I just want to say thank you for putting us in the position. And look, it only takes one person, right? You've got you, and then you've got Dr. Heim on, in his circumstance, one or two people can make a difference, and you're doing that. So for sure, we'll be praying for you. And just thank you so much for your courage.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, and look, I have to say, always nice that it's a Texan. This is kind of what we do, our type of people. Vanessa Sivadge has been our guest today on the Texas Values Report. I'm about to run out of time. Y'all know I have kids that are teenagers. You don't have to have a kid to be sensitive to these things. Listen, I had one of my children had a procedure at Texas Children's Hospital. They're, they are considered one of the best. You go in there and you just feel like this is a world-renowned facility. I'm putting my child in the hands of the best, and so that gives you some sense of safety and comfort. And you hope that politics has nothing to do with it. You hope these issues that are a part of cultural movements and manipulations or whatever are not finding their way into these areas and tainting these things, but clearly they have. And so that means we've got to do something about it, and soon, so more people don't get hurt, and God forbid anyone loses their life over these type of situations. So my clock is not running the way it used to here, so I think I'm almost out of time. But a lot of great speakers have been added. Vanessa Sivadge, as we mentioned. Also, Lee Wamsgans from Patriot Mobile is now going to be one of our speakers. I'm forgetting somebody else that we confirmed recently. I'll try to remember, and we'll put some of that stuff up on social media. Oh, Ryan Bangert from Alliance Defending Freedom is going to be one of our newest speakers. Of course, Sid Miller, statewide agriculture commissioner. He ain't going to just talk about land and cattle, but he will. But you got to hear about his bus that showed up at the RNC at the hotel where we were staying, where delegates from Texas were staying. I had an absolutely wonderful time there, and I want to share a little bit more about that when I can, when I've got more time. But check out my social media. You can see some of the stuff I've done at Twitter, Jonathan Saenz, TX, and other formats as well. Coach Joe Kennedy, Macy Petty in the Save Women Sports, Mary Margaret Olahan, who reports for the Daily Signal and does some wonderful interviews with some of the top people like Speaker Mike Johnson. But I had a great time in D.C., got real close to some of those things happening at Union Station, got to meet with other great leaders from other states that do work like myself, and I was out on the speaker's balcony. Now, Mike Johnson wasn't there, so he owes me a little favor that we actually need to see each other in person. I'm hoping he's going to speak at our policy event. But he did come out there and make sure that the American flags were restored at Union Station. And so please be in prayer for all these issues. Things are really tight. You got the Olympics fallout and all this stuff going on. And so it's not a reason to lose hope, but it is a reason to say, don't allow anybody to try to silence you. Don't allow anybody to try to tell you, hey, you need to relax. Why? These are important issues. We're talking about constitutional fundamental issues. We can be calm in our advocacy, in our expression, but a lot of times when people use phrases like that, they're trying to suggest to you that you don't need to take things this seriously and that there's something wrong with you voicing your concern. There's not. It's called the First Amendment, and we have every right to do it. And you better believe I'm going to be one of the people that is not going to be silent. You see value in our work? Go to our website, txvalues.org. You can make that tax-deductible donation today. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And that's how together we'll protect faith, family, and freedom in Texas. And we'll talk to you next week on the Texas Values Report.